top stories, Ethiopia dismisses report by Human Rights Watch as distorted. And fighting escalates in Khartoum after ceasefire expires. Hello and thank you for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Stay with us. The Ethiopian government on Tuesday rejected a report by Human Rights Watch that accused local authorities and regional forces of pursuing a campaign of quote-unquote ethnic cleansing in Western Tigray despite last year's peace deal. The allegations are not substantiated by evidence, Ethiopia's Government Communication Service GCS said in a statement. This distorted and misleading portrayal of the situation attempts to undermine peaceful coexistence and fuel inter-ethnic conflict and obstruct the national efforts for peace and reconciliation. The Ethiopian government said the US-based rights group had made the allegations without conducting a thorough and credible investigation in all areas affected by the conflict. The statement issued today by the Government Communication Service said Addis Ababa has embarked on nationwide consultations on a process for transitional justice, which would allow a comprehensive investigation. The truth will be told and all perpetrators of crime will be held accountable, it said. The Council of Ministers today approved a total of 801.6 billion birr draft budget for the 2023-24 Ethiopian fiscal year. The approval was made during its 21st regular session, the Office of the Prime Minister confirmed. This fiscal year draft budget of the federal government has been prepared from the outlook of maintaining the nation, helping citizens displaced by natural and man-made disasters, rebuilding the infrastructure damage due to conflicts, and achieving the directions and objectives of social and economic transformation that may occur in the future. The proposed budget was presented to the Council as 369.6 billion birr for the regular expenses of the federal government, 203.9 billion birr for capital expenses, 214.07 billion birr for support to the regional states, and 14 billion birr for the implementation of sustainable development goals, with a total of 801.65 billion birr. African media scholars approached by EBC reiterated that various Western media houses tend to report solely negative contents that sometimes blow out of proportion African events. The scholars further elaborated that African-owned media houses need to take the initiative of reporting well-balanced and positive stories regarding the continent. Tigust Sarnis has the following report.
The sharing of biased and false news has become.
For generations, that single story for Africa has been one of despair, famously headlined as the hopeless continent. The newer single story about Africa is that of Rising Africa. It is now high time to get beyond this new single story as well. Africans are far from being a single people. While technically comprising 54 countries with 16.72% of the total world population, there are potentially even more nations within Africa. Despite all that, according to the most Western media houses, premeditated narratives, multiple stories, those are pretty far-fetched from the reality on the ground, and ill-founded reports have been produced about the entire African continent.
And the Ethiopian and Eritrean governments.
BBC has found that nearly 2,500 children died of malnutrition in Ethiopia's.
Approached by EBC, media scholars from around Africa reiterated that, reporting about Africans, various Western media houses tend to report solely negative contents that sometimes blows out of proportion. The scholars further elaborated that African-owned media houses need to take initiatives of reporting a well-balanced and positive stories regarding the continent.
Just looking at what media can contribute is like actually bringing Africa on board. It's like reporting positively about Africa. It's like actually getting the world to know that Africa is not only about wars, that Africa is not only about conflicts, Africa is not only about corruption and theft and all that. So we have a lot of good things that are happening in Africa that can contribute to the world's development.
Kind of journalistic practice that really, originates from us and then is for us and is about us. And we need just to have that kind of journalism.
Andrew Nyanyuki from Eastern African University in Rwanda stressed for his part that for far too long Africans were denied to tell their own stories, which now the due course need to be changed, he noted.
They've been telling our stories in the manner that they deem best, in a manner that serves their interests. But I think it's time we walk the talk. It's not that we don't know that other people telling our story is wrong, and it's not that we don't have the ability to tell our own stories. We have the ability, we have the means, we just need to start like yesterday.
He also went on saying that having one mouthpiece as Regional African Media Center might help reshape the image of Africa.
It will be one of the significant moves towards even achieving a united Africa if we will have one center that we consider the mouthpiece of the African ideology, of the African agenda.
Stressing the need to mute the voices that propel separatism and interventionist premeditated agendas through various Western media outlets, he says African governments need to address own weaknesses internally. He further indicated that imported solutions for African problems never brought lasting solutions.
At any moment you've seen Africans trying to import solutions to their problems, those solutions have always failed. They've always ended up in waste of time, waste of resources.
The answer is Africa.
Mayor of Africa's diplomatic capital Addis Ababa, Adanech Abeebe, launched the construction of the Window of Africa mega project today. The Window of Africa project comprises 5 lots with various features in each. The first lot is awarded to China First Highway Engineering Company, while the remaining 4 lots will be done in partnership with Ethiopian business people. Mayor Adanech and China First Highway Engineering Company Ethiopia General Manager Wei Qiang-yu laid a cornerstone to commence the development of the project. The contractor is expected to complete the construction of Lot 1 in a year and a half, and it lies on 14.5 hectares of land comprising flower gardens and recreational areas.
Welcome to the land of origins. Commercial Bank of Ethiopia is pleased to serve all your traveler banking needs. If you have money from any of these 16 countries, you can convert it to local currency by visiting our nearest branch. Alternatively, our secure Forex ATMs accept cash exchange, or if you prefer using your cards, we've partnered with Visa, MasterCard, and UnionPay so that you can withdraw cash from our local ATMs or make cashless transactions at thousands of local POS partners securely and with confidence. We are linked with more than 700 global banks through our direct SWIFT address, CBE Theta. We also work with 16 international money transfer agents, out of which Tune and WorldRemit enable you to make direct deposits into our savings and current accounts or our popular CBE Burr mobile wallet. Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, the bank you can always rely on.
Well, Welcome back. State Minister for Urban and Infrastructure, Fanta Dejane, highlighted the major policy issues related to structural transformations which Ethiopia is undertaking to modernize the urban sector. The Ethiopian delegation, led by State Minister Dejane, is taking part in the second session of the UN Habitat Assembly, which is being held beginning June 5 in Nairobi, Kenya, under the theme For a Better Urban Future. In a statement he made at the opening session, the State Minister highlighted the major policy issues related to structural transformations which the government of Ethiopia is undertaking to modernize the urban sector, according to the Ethiopian Embassy in Kenya. The event was officially opened by William Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya. Russian ambassador to Ethiopia, Yevgeny Terekin, underlined the importance of promoting multilingualism, human identity, civilization, and heritage. His remark came here today when the Russian embassy in Addis Ababa and the United Nations colorfully celebrated the annual Russian Language Day in the premises of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Kazahun Chane attended the event and compiled the following report.
Russian embassy in Addis Ababa and the United Nations celebrated Russian Language Day colorfully at the premises of the United Nations Economic Commission of Africa in the presence of various countries' ambassadors, the diplomatic corps, Ethiopian high government officials, and Russian-speaking Ethiopians and dignitaries. The initiative of the United Nations Language Days was launched in February 2010 to celebrate multilingualism and cultural diversity and to promote equal use of all six of the UN's official working languages throughout the organization. In 2010, the United Nations created Language Days for each of their 6 official languages: Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. The goal is to promote multilingualism and cultural diversity. June 6 was chosen as Erie's the birthday of Alexander Pushkin, the father of Russian literature. In his opening remarks, Antonio Pedro, the acting Secretary General of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, said that commemorating Language Day is in line with human culture, civilization, humanity, and sovereignty, stating that Russian Language Day, which is the working language of the United Nations, is the second most widely spoken language over the internet across the world.
The Russian language is the second most widely used language on the internet, the 4th most translated language in the world, and the 7th most common language into which content is translated. It is spoken by 350 million people, counting, and continues to be a lingua franca throughout much of Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and the Caucasus. This demonstrates the Russian language extends beyond the borders of the Russian Federation, thanks to its use and status as an official language of the United Nations. We are celebrating all that today. The Economic Commission for Africa is working hard to strengthen cooperation with our partners in multilingualism. To that end, we have reached an agreement with the Russian Center for Science and Culture in Addis Ababa to create a Pushkin section within the ECA library.
Appreciating the United Nations for its great cooperation to celebrate the Russian Language Day, Yevgeny Terekin, Russian ambassador to Ethiopia, explained to the attendees that the day is celebrated to promote multilingualism, civilization, and heritage.
Well, today is the 6th of June, the day when we celebrate the birthday of our great ancestor and our great poet and writer Alexander Pushkin. He is considered to be the father of the modern literature language of Russia. And due to this, we decided to pronounce in 2011 by special decree of the President of Russian Federation. This day was pronounced as the national holiday, the Day of Russian Language. For us, Russian language is our native language. We like it, we are proud of it. At the same time, Russian language is a language of international communication. It is one of the United Nations languages.
The director of the Pushkin Center for Science and Culture in Addis Ababa also said that the center has been undertaking a wide range of activities to spread the Russian language and knowledge to Ethiopians and citizens of other countries living in Ethiopia.
Russian cultural centers, this time we call them Russian houses, in many countries in the world. It is a network organization. On the African continent, first of all, I would like to introduce to your attention few our stations where Russian language is performed, where Russian language is delivered to the societies of each African country, where we have our stations.
Following a decision of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, in 2010 to celebrate the Russian Language Day every year, it will be celebrated every year at the Commission Hall in Addis Ababa.
Meanwhile, many Ethiopian students who studied the Russian language at home and abroad agreed that learning the language is essential if one wants to learn more about the long-standing diplomatic ties between Ethiopia and Russia. The students also advised other Ethiopians to learn Russian language for academic purposes, citing numerous scholarship opportunities in various fields of study at renowned universities in Moscow, in addition to the significance of establishing people-to-people ties. Their views have been compiled as follows. Take a listen.
Which it gives to me is that I went to the Soviet Union at the time and studied Russian language. Not only Russian language, international law in Russian language. So it helps me to communicate with Russians, and there are many foreigners who know Russian language. So I came back to Ethiopia and joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And as soon as I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, after 2 years, I was assigned to Moscow as a diplomat, because the Russian language, it helps me to be appointed there to Russian language. Before going to Moscow as a diplomat, I was an interpreter to Comrade Mengistu Haile Mariam, from Russian into Amharic.
I wish, really I wish, because I hope they will get a lot of, not only the education, how to live, how the culture is, how the people are moving, how they are doing, how all these things beyond this education course.
I stayed in Russia, Moscow, for 3 years, studying material science. The first year is preparatory course, which means we studied Russian language, culture, and some disciplinary scientific work in Russia. After 1 year, we just getting to the normal course. So from there, I learned a lot of things, because in our country, even I am a lecturer, so I know the problem of the laboratory and the practical work. So there they have an intensive practical work, laboratory, and also the professors are highly experienced. They are well-known publisher online research. So obviously learning there and sharing experience from those professors is really exciting for me.
Russian language is one of the 6 languages of United Nations. And the second thing is in Russian language, it's more widely spread throughout Europe. And I studied also in Russia. Before I left to Russia, I studied here at Pushkin Center for 1 year. So then I joined Krasnodar University, and I studied there preparatory and first year. Then I left Krasnodar. I just joined in Ukraine, Kharkiv region. Also studied agronomy as a plant breeding I studied. And Russian language is very vital. I like to read literature. So for me, it's from the first source of a Russian language, like Dostoevsky, Chekhov, Tolstoy, Gorky, and Belayev. A lot of writers I read in Russian language.
I urge all Ethiopians to go to Russia and study this language because it is very expressive, very expressive. Now, when I go to some international organizations, I want to listen speeches and lectures in Russian rather than English because Russian expresses everything.
The education system is highly advanced and the professors are highly experienced. So it's obviously, I recommend everyone who has a chance to participate. There are plenty scholarship, government scholarship and open door, and there are a lot of universities that offering scholarship for Ethiopia, especially for Africa. So they participate, and if they win, it's good to go in Russia.
In business news, Ethiopia has been giving proper response to national and international shocks to prevent the nation's sustainable economic development. Underlining that Africa is the land of opportunities, where creating conducive environment is crucial to unlock such opportunities, participants pointed out that strong business environment partnership is also instrumental to realize the continent's economic ambitions. We have the following dispatch. Take a look.
The recent trade and investment relations among African countries are not exceeded 20%, and it placed under its huge potential. Most of African countries imported goods and products out of Africa. To improve the existing problem, the first African Trade and Investment Summit opened in Addis Ababa to promote trade and investment relations among African countries. Speaking on the occasion, State Minister for Industry Hassan Mohammed said the summit is critical to improve trade and investment relations among African countries.
If the foreign investors come to Ethiopia, there will be a job creation, the productivity will increase, and it ultimately will increase the share of the economic for the country of Ethiopia. The participants comes from different countries and different continents which are interested to invest in Ethiopia in order to boost the economy and the relationship between other countries.
According to Hassan, Ethiopia is the leading African country in registering remarkable growth in attracting foreign direct investment in Eastern African region.
So this is a kind of promotion and networking for the foreign investors to invest in Ethiopia, and we explain to them the opportunity we have in Ethiopia and the natural endowment which God gave us gave Ethiopia, and to invest more in Ethiopia, and they will get much more benefit if they come to Ethiopia and invest.
The capacity of managing national and international shocks plays a significant role to register sustainable and resilient economic development in Ethiopia, the State Minister underlined. Abdul Nasser Turki, who is chairman and CEO of the Investment Center for Africa, for his part said further efforts are needed to improve trade and investment relations among African countries.
The objective of this summit is promoting investment and trade of Ethiopia, including the mining and agricultural and other sectors. And also it's helped our African and international investors to participate with us here, to network with our local Ethiopian business actors.
It is expected that critical decisions that help us to bolster African trade and investment will be decided in the first African Trade and Investment Summit in Addis Ababa. Ministers, representatives from African countries, development partners, business persons, policy advisors, among others, are attending on the first African Trade and Investment Summit in the metropolis.